I'm Jason Gorman, and this is the Learning Experience Ops Show. However, today's a little different. I am flipping the script on myself a little bit here because in this case, I'm the interviewee, not the interviewer. This episode is republished from the EdTech Leaders podcast with host Oliver Lief. And in our conversation, we get into some good stuff. We talk about the very core of what I think learning experience design is all about. We talk about why I believe my business, Jackrabbit Learning Experience, will shift from what it has mostly been. It's been mostly designing and building things to mostly consulting in the future. Not exclusively, but I think that shift is happening. And also we talk about how I think about measuring the efficacy of learning. I also talk a little bit about my own path into this work, being a learning professional and what my business does. I will be back as the interviewer next week. I'm talking with Tom Driscoll, the CEO of EdTech Teacher. It's going to be a good one. Until then, I hope you enjoy my conversation with Oliver. There's an over-indexing on what should the content be and how do we get it to the learner, and an under-indexing on what is the learner's context and what does that mean in terms of how we shape the experience they're in, which includes the content. This is a mistake because we've all had bad training. Just think back to the worst training you've had. If you've had a bad online training, and I know you have because all of us have had bad online training. Usually it's content page, you read the page, you click a button, you go to the next page, and you're just getting new little chunks of topic every page. And that is just not effective. It's not effective from a teaching and learning perspective. It's obviously not effective from a motivation and engagement perspective. There's some critical things that's not doing that we should always do in any kind of learning experience.
Hello, welcome to EdTech Leaders. Today we have Jason Gorman, the founder and CEO of Jackrabbit LX. Welcome.
Thank you, Oliver. Thanks for having me.
So, tell us who you serve and what you do for them.
We work with lots of different kinds of organizations. We don't work in a single vertical. The types of organizations we try to work with are ones that have high social impact. So we do lots of work in higher education. We do lots of work in healthcare, clean energy. We work in other places as well, but those are some of our frequent flyers are in those categories. And the kinds of work that we do for them, it's really two things. So we do consulting and we also make learning experiences. The consulting that we do is about helping organizations that are kind of sputtering along, need to shore up what they're doing internally to keep creating learning content, need to do more with less. And then the other place that we help in our consulting practice is working with organizations that really need to grow what they're doing, right? They have a small team and the CEO has said, we need 100 more of these things that we've made 10 of. And they say, oh, well, we can't do that with our current capacity and they need to scale up. So we help organizations scale. Both of those things amount to capacity building. Then in the making side, we make the stuff. So we can help somebody do it or we can do it ourselves. And that includes everything from conceptualizing what a program should be, designing it, testing it, working with learners, working with subject matter experts, doing all the graphic design, all the learning experience design, building a prototype, writing, playbook, and then scaling out and making lots and lots of courses if there are courses or, other assets or things that go into a learning experience.
How much do you do one versus the other, roughly?
Oh, that's a really good question. It's changing a lot. I would say 5 years ago, it was really mostly the making. And it's really shifted in the last couple of years on purpose. We have really tried to do more of the consulting work. I'm going to say it's probably 30% consulting, 70% making. And my guess is that probably 3 years from now, it will be flipped. We're going to be doing mostly consulting and less making.
And why is that? Is it because it's easier to make things? Is it because more and more companies have systems in place and they just need help growing it? Why do you think it will be flipped?
Because the first thing you said, it is easier to make things. It's going to be easier for a company to hire people to build a program less expensively with fewer resources. But the thing that organizations don't have is the know-how to do that the right way. So they need a framework, a way of doing things, a real solid playbook. And we see that as a niche for us to fill, is to come in and be that advisor, that partner that can also look, if they need to build and fly the plane at the same time, we can do both those things. We can make the program that they need to make right now, but we can also help them build their capacity. But we are guessing that the capacity building will become a bigger differentiator for us, just from a business standpoint, and also in higher demand as the world continues to change at a ridiculous breakneck pace.
So if a company comes to you, they have a program in place, and they say, we have this great program, just make it bigger. Do you go in and look at it and sometimes say, you think it's good, but it could be a lot better? It's not as good as you think it is. Does that happen?
That's a tricky conversation. So I think if you're a consultant and somebody is inviting you in to assess whether the baby looks good or not, then you can give a fair assessment easily. If you are coming in and you're asked to make more of something that already exists, your opinions about the quality of that thing might be less welcome. So I'm sensitive to those things because it's a lot of work to build these programs, and so I do think if somebody's hiring me and my team, I think they are hiring us for all of our expertise. I would want to find ways to give them the full benefit of working with us, but I also don't want to insert my opinion necessarily where it's not wanted.
Mm-hmm. So how did you get into this in the beginning? What's your background?
Well, my background is education. I started out as a teacher, teaching English to foreign language, people for whom English was their second language. And then I decided I liked education, but I didn't want to be in the classroom all the time. And so I went and got a degree in instructional design, and I worked in higher education as an instructional designer. So I was working with faculty to help them build online courses sometimes, but very often it was helping them do interesting things with technology in their face-to-face classes. And I worked in higher ed for 10 years, and then I went into consulting where I started to work with lots of different organizations. I worked for a company that did that. I helped them grow their consulting practice. They had been very focused on K-12 education, specifically publishing. And in the consulting practice, it's allowed us to branch out into lots of other areas, lots of other types of client organizations. I left that organization. I went to work for another one, worked there for a year. I came in, laid off one day, and started Jackrabbit. I had sort of had plans, that I was building on the side, but I was kind of shoved out of the nest. had to go do it one day.
Well, what was that? What was the impetus? Did you feel forced to, or was it something you wanted to do for a while and it was just like, okay, now is the time?
It's something I wanted to do for a while. And it was an opportunity. Losing my job turned out to be the opportunity I needed. What I really wanted in building my own business, or thinking about building my own business, was the opportunity to take all of these ideas that I had about what I believe work in the process of creating a great learning experience, some of which I was able to do in my jobs, some of which, because of politics and other people should have inputs and opinions. And sometimes I thought those were good, and sometimes I differed in my opinion. I wanted to have the opportunity to kind of own the whole thing and just see how that would go. It was a bit of a challenge to myself, but I think that's really why I did it.
So can you share some of those insights with us? I mean, after years of teaching and then instructional design in school, you're out on your own, and you, by this point, have seen things that didn't work well. Mm-hmm. What are some of the common mistakes that companies or schools make in instructional design?
Well, the biggest mistake is that there is a focus on content and no focus on what the learner needs. And maybe another way to say that is there's an over-indexing on what should the content be and how do we get it to the learner, and an under-indexing on what is the learner's context and what does that mean in terms of how we shape the experience they're in, which includes the content. This is a mistake because we've all had bad training. Just think back to the worst training you've had. If you've had a bad online training, and I know you have because all of us have had bad online training, usually it's content page, you read the page, you click a button, you go to the next page, and you're just getting new little chunks of topic every page. And that is just not effective. It's not effective from a teaching and learning perspective. It's obviously not effective from a motivation and engagement perspective. There are some critical things that's not doing that we should always do in any kind of learning experience, which is making the new content. How is it relevant to that person? How is it relevant to their past? What they need to do today? What their aspirations are for the future? How is it relevant to their context, their community, the other people in their cohort? What kinds of connections are you allowing that person to make in their learning experience with their peers, with the content, with their instructor? Just a straightforward content delivery is just one little corner of an overarching learning experience. And so what we do is try to take a step back, look at it more holistically. And actually, one other thing that I haven't mentioned, but I do want to highlight is storytelling. Straight up content is not storytelling, but good storytelling helps you remember, helps you apply, and that's something that we strive for too.
How do you know if people have learned what you're trying to teach them, and how do they practice?
So this is probably the hardest question in what I do, and it's extremely dependent on the organization that we are working for. So our client. So if it's a K-12 situation, so K-12 schools have their own ways of benchmarking student progress. So we would use those benchmarks, even though I would say many people argue that those benchmarks are deeply, deeply flawed. If we're working with a, corporate client that is doing internal training for people, and they want to measure whether that person has learned something, we might ask questions about, well, what is the performance that you're trying to change? What are the things that you want this person to do differently in their work? How would you measure that they're doing it differently? So for us, the question would really have to be back on the client to understand what's important to them around the metrics. And then we have to back into, well, how do we measure those things? And to be honest with you, sometimes it's impossible to really find a way that everybody's satisfied is really measuring the progress. And sometimes it's inappropriate to try to measure the outcomes too soon. Somebody told me once, I love this. His name's Charles Fidel. Charles once said to me, I think about if we have a student in the 10th grade learning about climate change, and then it kind of has an impact on them, right? They really feel the urgency around this issue that we all face. And then they go to school and they have a career and they don't do anything with climate change, but then they decide, somebody convinces them to run for Congress. And they run for Congress, they get in, and then when they're 53, they put a bill on the floor that is about climate change because they were, right? Like, that's the payoff. So like the payoff of this person in 10th grade maybe doesn't happen until they're 53. We can't measure that, but those things are real. And so when we think about measurement in education, I think is a impossibly complicated question, even though there are ways to get at it.
Well, there are many different modalities for teaching. I mean, a company might want to teach something that is really imperative for someone to master.
Yep.
Right. And
yes.
So you have to work out a way for them to master that, not just use a multiple choice. And
Right.
then there are other learning situations we've all faced in corporate environments where they just want to check a box that they showed you the video and they're done.
Yes. Right.
And they don't really care about mastery. It's maybe, to just talk about the different paradigms and how you deal with those.
So skills mastery is critical. That is one way to measure success. So measuring skills mastery, like you said, and that could be, we want to make sure that, so we're rolling out a new tool. Everybody needs to use this new tool effectively. We're going to measure the quality of a certain type of work that's being produced before for each individual. And then we're going to measure the quality of what they're doing afterwards for each individual. You have to develop sophisticated metrics for how you're doing those measures and how are you gathering real work. That those are their own questions, but that is one way to do it. Another way to do it might be other metrics that you could use to infer that the learning is effective. So sometimes some of the work we do is around customer education. So for businesses that are training their customers on how to use their products, they don't have the opportunity to really measure the learning directly or the understanding directly. But what they can do is that if they can see, well, we put this training out and we have the opportunity to see which of our customers are using the training and how their behavior changes on our platform afterwards, that could be an indication of learning or perhaps just increased interest and dedication. So it's hard exactly to know, right, how much to attribute to learning, but that's another way that you might approach it. But you're right. I mean, I won't say that self-reported satisfaction or completion is nothing. It is something. It's very low level. It doesn't tell you whether or not it's sunk in or really helped somebody. But I don't think those are unimportant metrics. I think they're still worth gathering. But finding the deeper impacts that you're looking for and then finding ways to gather that data meaningfully is going to be different for each type of organization. And if you don't have sophisticated enough technology to go and gather data automatically, then you can do things like call people up in 3 months and say, hey, can we have a conversation? I'd really like to just talk about how things are going and just have a one-on-one, have 5 one-on-ones with people to gather that data, or send a survey to just get a sense of, and that's self-reported, which is not as good, but it's better than nothing. So I think that's part of it too, is sometimes there may need to be trade-offs. You might need to go for good instead of perfect. But this is a messy, complicated part of what we do.
Right. I guess part of what I'm getting at is you have to work within the framework if they have existing technology, and you have to figure out how to deal with that. If you're starting from scratch, where you can recommend, there are platforms that might work better for practicing in real time. But if the corporation, and especially a big corporation, doesn't have it in place, you just have to kind of work with what they have.
That's right. That's right.
So bring me to the next step of AI and integrating new technologies into a company that hasn't been exposed to it.
Everybody's asking for it or curious about it, or at least willing for us to use it to do what we're doing faster, with only a couple of exceptions. There are still organizations out there that just have blanket no AI policies, and then we don't use any of it for them. But organizations, I would say, are all what I'm seeing is that organizations are in very different places right now. A year and a half ago, most people were more or less in the same place in terms of either they hadn't used it or had only used it a little bit. They didn't really know. They were just trying it out, maybe doing some personal productivity things with it, but not applying it to their processes. Now, I do think there's a gap that is widening here. The people who never went and really played with the technology, figured out what it did, they are now feeling behind in a way, and there is a gap between them and the folks that are really working to figure out how it can be applied to what they're doing. For us, one of the things that we're interested in doing on the consulting side is helping organizations kind of level up with this. So if you haven't done anything, or if you've done very little, but you're not really sure how to kind of systematize it, this is something that we're helping organizations do now, and we are not quite there. Maybe by the time this podcast come out, we will be. We're going to have an offering that's called AI Playbook in a Day, and the whole idea is to analyze what the learning organization does currently, analyze what are the opportunities to enhance it with AI to make things go faster, to automate things, to increase the quality, so forth, and then create a plan for how to build towards it. People need that. I think this is a gap, and I think it's also not a one-time thing. Is part of the challenge. I think one of the things that we hear from clients is they have tried AI, they have done a few things, but then another thing is released, and they get freaked out and intimidated that there's now another whole tool or another whole capability that they have to go back and retrofit all the changes they just made. It's a lot. It's a lot for organizations to deal with and reckon with.
So you're working on an offering for AI assisted learning to go along with their current learning.
They're really, well, we can think about it in two ways. One is our consulting for their own capacity. So we can help organizations. We do help organizations really think through how to use AI just in the process of making stuff. But then of course we're doing that ourselves. We're constantly in our own processes. We're revisiting and updating those. But then on the student facing side, yes, we're also doing that. And these are things are changing all the time. We've been using AI that's student facing, like voice, video, content. We've been producing those things, images, for a couple years now, and there are massive benefits to that. And so we are definitely using these technologies to create student facing experiences. And I think the last major frontier with this is one that I think we're entering now. When I say now, this is October 20th that we're recording this. This stuff matters. Are chatbots that are specifically learning, that are delivering the majority of or large chunks of a learning experience. So you sit down, and instead of going through page, one or two videos, a lot of it is happening just in a chat where it asks you a question, you're answering a question, maybe it gives you a video, maybe it gives you some audio or some images, but it is hyper personalized. This is where we're all getting closer to that. We're not there yet, but that will happen. So, when I think about AI use, I think about it kind of on the personal individual level, on the kind of system level of creating learning experiences. Like as an organization, those things have to be systematized. And then I think the last level is really the student facing piece. But AI is important in all of those places.
That's great. Let's shift over to the business side and marketing a little bit, if that's okay. Yeah. And just tell us what you've done throughout the company that has worked well, and what are some of the challenges in marketing and growing?
Everything that has worked well has been about building relationships. What we do is very relationship dependent. We're not a service that somebody would come and click a button on our website and buy our service that way. And if we're going to work with somebody, they need to know us, they need to trust us. Typically we're doing something important with our clients that is high value for them, sometimes high risk for them to get wrong. And so in order to do that work, we have to have just a good relationship. And there's really nor there should be any shortcuts around that. And I think what that means for marketing is that there are certain things that are just a waste of time, right? They're a waste of time for us. They'd be a waste of time for somebody we would want to get in touch with. And, some of those things are, okay, SEO, not that important for us. Cold outreach, really difficult to do that effectively for a business like ours. So, what we've been doing is we've been going to conferences. We've been hosting events, virtual events and live events. And we've been, hosting dinners and get-togethers and just giving ourselves a lot of opportunity to build our network, to meet people, to learn about what people's needs are, and to see those opportunities bubble up in natural ways. That is really what's most effective for us.
You've tried cold outreach? That hasn't worked for you?
We did a couple times. Yeah, it didn't work. Yeah. And I think, and I was really hesitant to do it. But I'm not a marketer, and I didn't, I don't have any experience with this. And I think part of running this business for me has been about getting expertise in all the things, not, playing around, seeing what works. And it was something we tried in earnest a few times, and it just didn't work. And I think that's okay. I think it led us to a place where we now understand, again, that the relationship is the most important thing. And then, so the trick is, how do we give ourselves more opportunities to create more meaningful relationships? And that's kind of what it's all about. And actually, like doing this is part of is part of that for me, right? Before somebody meets me, if they have the opportunity to hear about how I think about my work and, the kind of care I put into what I do for my clients, get a sense of my philosophy, my personality, what my company does, that's helpful. That might create some other opportunity for us to talk down the line. So this is, part of it too.
Great. What are some of your goals? And have you had to, there's the magic wand question. You could wave a magic wand. Where would you be in 6 months or a year? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, we're really interested in helping organizations that do good things in the world expand, get a bigger megaphone, reach more of the people that they are serving. I think one way that we have done this has been making things for them, but I have really felt more and more that if we can help with an organization's operating system, how they do what they do, the people they hire, the technology they use, the playbook they use, the metrics, right, that they use. If we can help organizations get sturdy and healthy and lean and effective, that is just going to increase their impact. And so I would say, 6 months, a year, 3 years, we're really interested in just finding the most ways to empower organizations to do more. And I think that's why that mix is going to change to the more of the consulting, because I think it's more of an enablement play as opposed to a doing for you. So and I think that could look like a lot of different things. I think this is a work in progress. The world is changing, and we have been really aggressively rethinking what will be most meaningful and valuable to our clients. So hard to say exactly what it'll look like in a year, but I think directionally, that's what it looks like.
That's great. Thank you so much, Jason Gorman, founder and CEO of Jackrabbit LX.
My pleasure.
JackrabbitLX.com. Is that correct?
That's it.
Thank you so much for coming today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, Oliver. Thank you for listening. And a huge thanks to our guest today. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, and share it with your friends and colleagues. I'm Jason Gorman. I'm the founder and CEO of Jackrabbit Learning Experience, where we help organizations of all kinds make learning better through a clear, repeatable process that is future ready. If any of this resonates with you, just keep tuning in and please join the community we're building. I'm looking forward to seeing you next time. Bye.